Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on root cause analysis and systemic corrective action. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager here at PJR, and I'm delighted to be the host of today's webinar. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to access a copy of the recording within 24 to 48 hours after the conclusion of today's presentation. In addition, a copy of the slides will be available for download. You can access the recording and download the slides from our website, www.pjr.com, and again, about 24 hours to 48 hours after the conclusion of today's webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. This is to ensure sound quality. I will finish the presentation and be able to field questions. Please type your questions into the question feature, and I'll answer as many as possible at the conclusion of the prepared presentation. So today we're going to be talking about why this particular topic was selected. It's a very important one that impacts all clients, regardless of the standard against which you're seeking certification. We'll talk about the constituent parts of the audit finding and how a well-written finding by either your Perry-Johnson Registrars auditor or an internal auditor or your customer really sets you up for success. We'll talk about corrections or containment actions, root cause analysis. We'll go through one specific technique, the why or the 5 why technique. We'll talk about actions taken to prevent recurrence or corrective actions, actions taken to prevent occurrence or preventive actions, and the importance of thorough verification activities. Okay, why did we select this particular topic? Well, we want your organization to improve. I'm a firm believer, as is PJR, that there should be a strong correlation between how you do on your third-party audit and your overall on-time, on-quality record with your customers. So if you have a strong on-time quality, on-time delivery record with your customers, your audit results should be similar. But more importantly, if you're struggling with on-quality and on-time delivery performance, it's unlikely that you should have a strong, perfect audit if our auditors are doing their job. That being said, the purpose of a management systems audit isn't to convince the auditor to write as few nonconformities as possible. It's to accept the nonconformities that are written and to take systemic corrective action for each and every nonconformity that's found. And that's where we'll start to see the strong correlation between third-party audit results and your overall on-time, on-quality record with your customers. So let's talk about the audit finding. A well-written audit finding should have 3 distinct parts: the statement of nonconformity, objective evidence that supports that statement of nonconformity, and then a citation of the requirement that's not being met. Audit findings that do not contain these 3 distinct parts should not be written by PJR auditors and should not be accepted by you, the client. I'm here telling you as the direct supervisor of all auditors that you have the power to reject any poorly written nonconformity and ask our auditors to rewrite them. You should be rejecting any audit finding that does not contain these 3 distinct parts. It's a well-written audit finding that's the first step in successful problem solving. Observations and opportunities for improvement should exist only as statements or recommendations. And because a requirement is not being missed, all requirements are still being met. You're not going to see a citation of a requirement. So let's talk about some common pitfalls with the statement of nonconformity. Often the nonconformity that's recorded is not the problem, but a symptom of the problem. And in order for problem-solving efforts to be successful, the problem really needs to be expressed as an issue with the system. If the problem is expressed in terms of a person or a distinct incident, it's at the symptom stage. And I see both internal and third-party auditors make this mistake. It's important to get to the true problem. The systemic issue or the problem-solving efforts will not be effective. Fixing symptoms will not stop the issue from recurring. In addition, a well-written nonconformity should stand the test of time. Your organization should be able to look back at nonconformities that were written years ago and understand exactly what the problem was. So, and I always find it helpful to circle back a couple slides and demonstrate this last bullet point. Fixing symptoms will not stop the issue from recurring with an everyday example. So let's consider that you're feeling lousy, you've got a sore throat, you're running a fever, maybe a headache and some body aches and pains. You may take Tylenol or Aleve in an effort to alleviate your symptoms, bring down your fever, numb your sore throat pain. But taking all the Tylenol or Aleve in the world isn't going to help the overall systemic issue. It may address your symptoms, but if you have a strep throat infection, again, all the Tylenol, all the Aleve in the world will not kill the strep throat bacteria and prevent recurrence of the issue. So it's important that we're not just treating symptoms in our problem-solving efforts. So let's look at a poorly written finding. An example of a poorly written finding is that there was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. This is a symptom and not the true systemic issue. Here we're seeing an example of confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this finding: the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Supported by the objective evidence, there was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. So here we've separated our statement of nonconformity from the objective evidence, and this nonconformity statement is written at the system level. In fact, we even see the word system in the statement of nonconformity itself. And we're not confusing the symptom of the problem, a first shift operator running job 9954, with the nonconformity itself. So we're going to get problem-solving efforts at the system level as opposed to the one person running a particular job. And then we're citing a specific requirement, 9001, 2008, 622E, taking that as far out as possible, not just citing 62 or 622. So again, a well-written statement of nonconformity would be: the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. This focuses on the systemic issue and not on the discrete incident or symptom. Take a look at another poorly written example. Quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Again, a symptom and not the real problem. And again, we're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this: the document control system is not completely effective. Again, the word system is right in that statement of nonconformity, so we're getting problem-solving efforts directed towards the document-controlled system as opposed to the discrete objective evidence. The quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Directing our problem-solving efforts at just this one quality auditor will not prevent recurrence. So all of that needs to be in the objective evidence portion of the finding. Again, we're citing a 9001-2008 requirement, taking it out as far as possible to 423D. So a well-written statement of nonconformity, the document control system is not completely effective. We're focusing upon the systemic issue and not the incident. So a gut check. When you're reviewing the statement of nonconformity written by an internal auditor, a Perry Johnson auditor, one of your customers, if they're doing an audit of you, you want to ask the following. Are we distinguishing between the symptoms and the real problem, the systemic issue? Has the distinction been made? Does the final statement of nonconformity focus on a systemic issue as opposed to symptoms of the problem? Yet, are there sufficient data, objective evidence, and a citation of the requirement not being met in order for you to understand the problem and the breadth and depth of the issue? Just a couple of notes. We have an internal document, PGR Advisory 3. The intended audience is our auditor pool, and it requires all auditors to document any non-fulfillment of a requirement as a nonconformity. In fact, we tell them it's absolutely inexcusable not to do so. Not writing findings is no benefit for you, the auditee. It contributes to diminishment of the integrity of the management system certification process in 9001-2008. In addition, if you have an auditor that doesn't follow Advisory 3, followed by an auditor who does the right thing and does follow it, you're going to see inconsistency in your audit results. So it's our expectation that all nonconformities written by PGR auditors need to be documented as described with the three constituent parts. Statement of nonconformity written at the system or process level, objective evidence to assist in understanding the breadth and depth of the issue. Here's where we're going to include details about the specific incidents or symptoms, and a citation of the requirement not being met, taking that as far out as possible. Okay, let's talk about 8 actions taken to correct, corrections, or containment actions. And these are actions taken with respect to the symptom or incident. They're incident-specific actions. They're very important and should be taken immediately to stop the symptoms. They typically take 2 forms. We calibrated the gauge, we controlled the form, or adding a layer of inspection to catch any further occurrence. We're going to learn later that inspection adds cost to the system, not value. And once the root cause is determined, a corrective action is implemented to eliminate that root cause. We should be able to eliminate any costly added inspections we added to our system. Containment actions or corrections should be very specific. So regarding the 2 examples that we've been following through this webinar, the training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 was updated to reflect his competency to run the job unsupervised, or all copies of the uncontrolled form the quality auditor in the blue cell was using were destroyed. Corrections also need to include an extent analysis. So let's talk a little bit about what an extent analysis is. And in fact, one of the most common reasons for rejecting the correction provided by a client is that it lacks an extent analysis. So let's give an example of what an appropriate extent analysis might be for our first 2 examples. So sure, we fixed the training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954. In your extent analysis, you need to tell me if there are other training matrices that aren't updated and what you did about those. We had an uncontrolled form in the blue cell. Have you done a sweep of your plant to discover how many other uncontrolled forms are? That is your extent analysis. That's our expectation. And you include comments about an extent analysis and the results in a well-written correction. Moving on to root cause, one of the most common pitfalls for root cause is restating the incident for the root cause analysis, and this is never acceptable. So some examples of this. Our organization failed to update the training matrix for the operator running job 9954. And I read this and I think, yes, we know this, we told you this. Why is it that your organization failed to update the training matrix? We already told you it wasn't updated. Or the quality auditor in the blue cell didn't use the correct form to record the results of first article inspection. Again, we know this. The PGR auditor told you this. Why wasn't the correct form being used? So this is the most common pitfall in root cause analysis, restating the incident itself and not digging deep enough, not asking why enough times. Another pitfall, although not as common, is giving the containment action for the root cause, also not acceptable. Okay, so for those of you that are checking your email or looking at your Facebook page, now is the time to pay attention. This is the most important slide in the entire presentation. A good root cause analysis is going to answer the following question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? The focus is on the system, not the incident. It's possible that a problem may have multiple root causes or several possible root causes. And if you're unsure what the true root cause is, or if there are multiple root causes, all require corrective action. How do you know if you have the right root cause? Well, if you have the correct root cause, the problem should be able to be turned on and off, just like a light switch. If the problem cannot be turned on and off at will, then the root cause has probably not been found. So I'm going to introduce another example here. I used to work in automotive manufacturing, and we were running some parts for a General Motors vehicle. It was a dual cavity tool, a simple molded part, and the tool would drop a left-hand part and a right-hand part onto a conveyor. The operator would pick those up, inspect those parts, and then pack them. Left-hand parts had to go in the left-hand box, and right-hand parts had to go in the right-hand box. The problem is that it was a very narrow manufacturing cell configuration. And when the operator was doing pack out, the left-hand box and the right-hand box were right in line with each other. And in fact, the right-hand box was in front of the left-hand pack-out box. So not the most obvious configuration of the manufacturing cell. You would think the operator would turn away from the conveyor and pack the left-hand parts in a box that's on the left-hand side of the operator's body, and pack the right-hand parts in a box that's to the right-hand side of the operator's body. Not have the boxes be directly in line with one another. So we surmised, our problem-solving team, that this poor, narrow manufacturing cell configuration was the root cause of our problem. And we spent tens of thousands of dollars moving multiple ton presses. We actually had to move 3 of them, the press itself and then the 2 presses on either side, and then reconfigure, re-PPAP, and begin running parts again. However, we discovered that although we weren't mixing as many parts, we were still mixing left-hand parts in right-hand boxes and right-hand parts in left-hand boxes. And by the way, we also had to add that costly added layer of inspection by having a third-party sorting company on site at GM going through boxes of parts. However, we knew that we hadn't turned the problem on and off at will, and we hadn't found the true root cause. Now, there are many techniques for root cause analysis. Is not the fishbone technique or the 5 why or the why technique. I like the term the why technique as opposed to the 5 why, because sometimes you can get there in 3 whys and sometimes it may take more than 5 whys. So let's look at application of the why technique for the 2 examples that we've been following through this particular webinar. The first one is the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. There was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 indicating competence to run that job. So our first why is going to ask, well, why was there not a training matrix? Well, the first shift supervisor failed to update the training matrix as required by the 1st of the month. Why did he or she fail to update the matrix? Well, before the end of the previous month, the HR manager would email the training matrix template to all of the department supervisors, but it didn't happen this particular time. Well, why didn't it happen? Well, the HR manager left the company before the end of the month and her replacement didn't email the template to all the supervisors. Well, why didn't her replacement know to email the template? Well, the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to email the template to all supervisors. Now, in this particular case, we thought we got to the root cause of the problem in 4 whys. It's difficult sometimes to know if you've asked why enough. Here we felt, why didn't the procedure for training include this requirement? Well, it just didn't. We thought that we were there in 4 whys. Again, your problem-solving team should be multidisciplinary, include more than 1 person. It should never be just the management representative answering these nonconformities by him or herself. And if you have a lot of people in the room coming to an agreement that you've gone far enough, you can have some confidence that your root cause analysis is appropriate. Let's take a look at our second example. The document control system is not completely effective, substantiated by the objective evidence. Quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Well, why was he or she using an uncontrolled form? Well, controlled hard copies of the form had all been used up, so the quality auditor resorted to an uncontrolled form. Well, why didn't they just print one from the system? The quality auditor was not aware that when no hard copies were available, that the latest version of all forms could be printed from the database. Well, why wasn't the auditor aware of this? Well, the auditor wasn't given a username and password to access the database. Why not? The HR manager did not have a policy to ensure that all new hires are granted to a system user, a username and password. Again, how do we know we've gone far enough? It should not be the quality manager or management representative doing problem solving in a vacuum. It should be a multidisciplinary team. And if the team agrees they've asked why enough and you're really at the root cause, you can have some confidence you've gone far enough. When asking why over and over again fails to be fruitful, you can also have confidence that you've gone far enough. I always say I'm a mom of two small children, and they'll ask me questions and I'll say why, and they'll ask another question, I'll say, well, because. And when they ask why and why over and over again, and I finally get to the point where I say, because I'm the mom and I said so, you can have confidence that you've gone far enough. So when you're at the point of, because I'm the mom and I said so, your problem-solving team, again, a multidisciplinary team, can have confidence that they've gone far enough. We will never accept the following for root cause. Oversight, we see that a lot. I forgot, and some funny ones. Another ISO 9001 blunder, or our consultant messed up. Again, it's not your consultant system, it's your system. Human error, never acceptable. Humans make error, but your system should prevent them. I skipped over we misunderstood the requirement because I will have some flexibility for misunderstanding the requirement. I will have some flexibility if it's your stage 2 or maybe your first annual surveillance, but by the time it's surveillance audit 37, misunderstanding the requirement is no longer an option. Let's move on to corrective actions. Corrective actions should address the root cause, which means that they should address the following important question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? One common problem is that organizations just simply repeat their containment or corrections instead of giving a true corrective action. Again, this is never acceptable. Not only should the corrective actions address the systemic failure, but they should also be irreversible, and they should involve a change in the system. Training by itself is generally not a system change. Chances are you've trained before, so how is retraining going to prevent recurrence of the issue? Also, incident-specific actions or corrections tend not to be irreversible. In the automotive industry, corrective action should prompt changes to your design and process FEMA and your control plan, and they may require a new PPAP. There should be at least one corrective action for each root cause that's identified. Subsequent data should show that the problem has 100% disappeared. So let's go back to my example about the automotive manufacturing facility mixing parts. Left-hand parts are being packed in right-hand boxes and vice versa. At first, our problem-solving team thought that the poor, narrow manufacturing cell configuration with the pack-out boxes in a straight line contributed to the problem and was our root cause. We spent tens of thousands of dollars moving 3 multi-ton presses and had to re-PPAP. However, we were still mixing left-hand parts in right-hand boxes and right-hand parts in left-hand boxes. We hadn't turned the problem off like a light switch, and clearly the data are showing that the problem did not disappear 100%. We knew we didn't have the true root cause. Therefore, we reconvened our problem-solving team, and this time we invited a third shift material handler who said something very poignant. He said if it was impossible to pack a left-hand part in a right-hand box and impossible to pack a right-hand part in a left-hand box, you wouldn't have this issue. So we didn't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars moving manufacturing presses and doing new PPAPs. We got a packaging engineer to reconfigure the packaging, making it impossible to pack left-hand parts in right-hand boxes and right-hand parts in left-hand boxes. Certainly an expenditure, but not tens of thousands of dollars. And guess what? We were able to turn the problem off like a light switch. Subsequent data showed that the problem had 100% disappeared. And when we reintroduced the old packaging that wasn't error-proofed, we turned the problem back on again, of course in a controlled environment with no risk to the customer. But when we showed that the problem had 100% disappeared, we knew we had the true root cause. So let's look at corrective actions to address our root causes. Let's go back to the first example we've been following through. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Our corrective action: we've updated our procedure for training to include a requirement for the HR manager to email the training matrix template to all supervisors before the end of each month. The new HR manager was trained. She also added an automatic reminder to Outlook to perform this task. So the question we want to ask is, does this corrective action address our root cause? Let's go back and see. The procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to email the template to all supervisors. Is our root cause. And now our corrective action is the procedure for training has been updated. There's been some training that goes along with it, but training wasn't the only part of the corrective action, and we've added an automatic reminder to Outlook to perform this task. So we have a corrective action that addresses the root cause. Our second example, the document control system not completely effective. Our corrective action: the new hire work instruction was revised to include a requirement to grant new hires a username and password for the system. All HR people were trained on this change. Does this corrective action address the root cause? We'll go back and check. HR didn't have a policy to ensure all new hires are granted a system username and password. That's our root cause. And again, our corrective action: new hire work instruction was revised to include a requirement to grant new hires a username and password for the database as appropriate. There was training, but again, training isn't the only part of the corrective action. Let's talk for a few minutes about preventive action. Now, preventive action per se is not a part of 9001-2015, but there is a requirement for risk. And preventive action tools are one great way to address risk. So preventive actions will address one of two questions. What other systems exist that might have the same root cause present? Or what systems could I have had in place that would have prevented this from happening? Many corrective action report forms put corrective actions for preventive actions, and this is not appropriate. Unlike corrective actions, preventive actions address the future, not the past. So they're addressing what still could happen, not what did happen. If we're addressing a problem that's already happened, we want to prevent recurrence of that problem. And actions taken to prevent recurrence are corrective actions. Actions taken to prevent occurrence of a problem in the first place are preventive actions. So preventive actions should address the system that's at risk and not the incident. There's going to be no incidents or symptoms because the issue did not occur. There's just a potential for it to occur. It involves changing the system to prevent future problems. Keep in mind that preventive actions are not only identified because of nonconformities. Good preventive action systems require a proactive process with inputs for preventive action from multiple sources. Near-miss reports, 5S programs or other lean initiatives, employee suggestions, plant walkthroughs, layered process audits, etc. In other words, no nonconformity should never mean no preventive actions. Now, occasionally, I'll see a third-party auditor that will write up that the client has no preventive actions. And that finding is frustrating to me. No preventive actions doesn't necessarily equal a finding. What we're looking for is the system for preventive action. And if you've considered opportunities for preventive action, but have just made business decisions not to act on them. They're not cost effective. You've tried it before and it doesn't work. It doesn't fit with your mission, for example. But you're at least considering these opportunities for preventive action. That's perfectly appropriate that you may not implement any. Failure to consider opportunities for preventive action is, however, a valid finding. Okay, let's wrap up the prepared content with some words about corrective action verification. This is a very critical and often not performed step in the problem-solving process. And many corrective action forms do not have sufficient space or a prompt for verification. So what should you be looking at in a good verification activity? That containment actions or corrections have been taken, proper root cause analysis has been performed. You can turn the problem on and off just like a light switch. Irreversible systemic corrective actions have been implemented. These address the root cause. Again, removing costly added layers of inspection, and preventive actions have been taken if appropriate. Keep in mind that corrective actions, while they're supposed to be irreversible, could be reversible. When you're changing a system, which is what you should be doing when you're implementing a corrective action, not just fixing symptoms or specific incidents, changing systems means you're changing how work is performed. Change is difficult for people. Systems tend to return to where people feel comfortable. So you may want to continue verifying actions even after you get positive results after the first verification. In fact, some studies show that some corrective actions need to be kept open for up to 18 months with multiple verifications in order to prove that the corrective action is in fact irreversible. This has been a PGR process for some time now, but in order to promote sound problem solving, we don't accept corrective action responses while the auditor is still on site. You need to take time and convene your problem solving team. We don't want you doing this during the audit. We will, and we always have, continue to verify the effectiveness of previous corrective actions while on site. Do want to commend the International Automotive Oversight Board. They're responsible for some of today's slide content. Thank you. And that's it for today's prepared presentation, folks. I'll now open the floor up for any questions or comments. Again, all participants have been muted to ensure sound quality, so please type your questions into the question feature, and I'll answer as many of them as possible. Question, when will PGR auditors be trained on ISO 9001, 2015 and AS 9100D? Most of our auditors are trained on 9001, 2015, Jessica. And AS 9100D, aerospace auditors in the OASIS database have to go through the sanctioned training offered by Plexus. This won't be available for 9100 until November at the earliest, and for 9110 and 9120 until January of 2017. Someone's asking, how far back will the review of previous findings go? Well, on a given surveillance, we always look back at the prior audit at minimum, and at recertification, we look back at the 3-year history. Somebody's asking a question about 9001-2015. With reduced documentation requirements of ISO 9001-2015, how will that impact the auditing techniques of auditors? This is an excellent question, and I should have mentioned that I'll field any questions you have, even those that aren't on today's topic. Yes, Erin, it's true. 9001-2015 has many fewer requirements for formal procedures. It's no longer even a requirement for a quality manual. We're finding that many organizations have chosen to keep these documentation, the quality manual and procedures, because they already had them and they're working. If an organization is less documentation, it does make auditing a bit harder for auditors because they can't fall back on a procedure. They may have to do more interviews and observations in order to ascertain that the procedure is well implemented and maintained amongst the various users. Someone's saying that preventive action is not a requirement in 9001-2015 any longer, and that's true. What's the approach to corrective actions in this case? I'm guessing it means to preventive actions in this case. And again, you can still choose to implement preventive actions. There are requirements for risk, and many risk-based tools employ preventive actions. Someone's asking, when a corrective action is not the correct one, do we need to restructure the CAR to reconsider a correct root cause? Yes. If the corrective action is not the correct one, and you'll know this because you can't turn the problem off like a light switch, subsequent data will show that the problem has not 100% disappeared. You will need to reconvene your problem-solving team and come up with a new corrective action. Someone's commenting that I mentioned in the webinar that any nonconformity should be recorded as such. What discretion can be applied to downgrade to observation? With a large sampling of documents, it's possible to uncover a clerical error that would be an NC. I think what you mean, John, is that would be an observation. So even one non-fulfillment of a requirement should be written as a nonconformity. I know it seems unfair that an auditor may pull a sample of 30 and only find one small issue, but it's still a non-conforming situation. We can cite a requirement that's not being met. It really would be inappropriate to document that as an observation. Karen's got a great situation here, and I'm sure many organizations implement this. I'll read her anecdote. We struggle with incidents where an employee fails to perform a step even though it's in the work instruction and they've been trained on it. They claim they forgot. We implemented a checklist, but they pencil whip it. How do you get to the root cause without resorting to calling it operator error? Karen, here, and I see this a lot, and it's frustrating. I know. A lot of people check the box when a checklist is implemented. So, you know, a checklist methodology probably isn't going to help your situation. People and systems tend to return to where they feel comfortable. What you need to do is make some changes in your process so it's impossible for them to make a mistake. Error proofing in your process. You know, adding sensors to make sure that the part was assembled correctly. Some poke-yoke. That's what it's going to take for some of these processes. And again, probably not the most cost-effective answer, but that's what we're looking here. You need to fix the process. Someone's asking about the why technique and its merits versus using the fishbone. The fishbone, I think, is a very valid technique. It's difficult to demonstrate, however, via webinar. And I would say use whatever tool works best for your organization and makes you feel comfortable. Someone is saying we outsource internal audits and registrar audits to you. And that, I believe, is a misstatement. PGR does not do internal audits. We only do certification body audits. There were multiple findings during our internal audit last year. There's turnover in our quality assurance department, and all the employees are new. Not all findings are corrected due to this. How will this be addressed? Jamie will be looking at all the corrective actions, the timing associated with them. It's possible that the timing that's appropriate for these corrective actions may not have been reached yet. But if it's something that should have been implemented quickly, that potentially will be an issue for you on your certification body audit. Someone's asking if we have to state what statistical method is used for problem solving under the new 13485. I'm looking right now, and I don't see that that is a requirement, Annette. Copies of the slideshow will be available for download from www.pjr.com. What's the normal timing for providing root cause analysis and corrective preventive action proposals to the auditor? Again, that's going to depend on the standard. As a general rule, usually about 60 days. Some standards, such as aerospace and automotive, have more strict timing, Branko. Someone's asking if we choose to keep our quality manual, do we need to update the manual to 2015? I suppose it depends. If it references 2008, you'll need to change those references to 2015. Remember, Michael, a good quality manual only needs to include 3 things: scope, exclusions, reference to procedures, and a copy of the description of the process interactions. And if it does that, it's sufficient. You don't need to regurgitate the standard and say that you do all of the requirements. I think, Evelyn, you have a great question about timing. After you perform root cause, is this when a corrective action should be assigned to the owner of the action to be taken? Yes, your problem-solving team should be multidisciplinary. Many people should be participating. You should assign responsibility and authority for implementation of the corrective action. You know, when it's a situation where everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible, so make sure that there is an owner for implementation of the corrective action. Somebody's asking if your processes involve mostly human interactions, like counting parts. There's not a lot of automation. What's a good way to implement corrective actions? That's tough. If you've got a lot of human interaction and there's little room for error proofing, maybe introducing weight scales or counting scales, that may help. Doing some studies amongst your operators to look at variability in your system is another way. Very similar maybe to like a Gauge R&R with the folks and the accounting activities. Julio, there's a lot, and difficult question to answer. What else is involved in risk? 9001 2015 has a extensive section on risk. It's important that you review that and implement those tenets throughout your processes. Can the quality manager be part of the root cause analysis team, and can they document the info? Absolutely. If it's appropriate for them to be part of the team, they should be, and they can also be the scribe. A follow-up question to that about the quality manager doing the corrective action. Can they do the verification as well? Somebody other than the person who implemented the corrective action should really do the verification. We'll wait a few minutes to see if there's any other questions. Again, type any questions into the question feature about root cause, corrective action, or any other topic. I'd be happy to field those. Rebecca's asking if the format shown in AS 13,000 is required for root cause corrective actions in an aerospace system. Rebecca, I'm not familiar with that document, and perhaps I should be. I would suspect, however, that like anything else, if it's flowed down by your customer as a requirement, you would need to implement it. The standards themselves, 9100, 9110, 9120, do not require it. Michelle's asking what's the frequency for audits between renewal audits. I believe you mean the recertification audit done by the certification body, and those are done every 3 years. Julie's asking who should write a corrective action? Any employer, is it best to be written submitted by a process leader? Your procedure should tell you who's responsible to write a corrective action, Julie, so make sure you're following that. In most cases, I see that power is given to all employees to implement preventive actions. Corrective actions are reserved for fewer employees in terms of initiating them. Somebody's asking if we have a checklist available for ISO certification. PGR does not use a checklist, a standard-based checklist that changes the requirements of the standard into a checklist for any of our audits. In fact, we don't recommend that our clients do it. We do have a series of documents called the F108 series sent to clients before their initial audit to help them gauge their readiness. So this would be sent to ISO 9001 or 14001 before your 2015 transition audits. Okay, everyone, I thank you for your time today. Again, a copy of this presentation. Oh, we've got another question coming in. I read somewhere that we should expect a major and several minors in our first 9001 2015 audit. Have you seen this to be the case? No, Karen, I haven't seen anything in that regard. Most of our transition audits have been fairly smooth. As I was saying, folks, copies of the slides and a recording will be available for download from our website, www.pjr.com, about 24 to 48 hours after the conclusion of today's webinar. I thank you for your time, and I hope you found this to be informative. Look forward to working with you again soon.